On the evening I thought would be ordinary, my daughter-in-law looked me in the eye and said, "My whole family will celebrate Christmas here, 25 people. You'll handle the cooking, right?" For a moment, I didn't even hear the clinking of forks or the low hum of the fireplace anymore. Her words landed like a heavy stone in my chest, pressing down so hard it was difficult to breathe. I'm 74 years old, and in that instant, I realized she didn't see me as a woman, a mother, or even a grandmother. To her, I was just a pair of hands, someone to peel, roast, scrub, and serve. I glanced at my son, hoping for something, anything, that might soften the blow. A smile, a gentle shake of the head, a word of defense. But he just nodded, lips tight, like a man agreeing to a contract. That hurt more than her words. I kept my voice calm, but inside I felt raw. My daughter-in-law leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs like a queen who had just announced her plans for the kingdom. She didn't ask, she didn't suggest, she declared. Her tone was polite, but the undertone was sharp, like a reminder of my place. Her family, her holiday, her rules. Every syllable stripped away another layer of belonging. I had spent my life building this house with Harold, painting walls, fixing roofs, decorating every corner so our children would always have a place to call home. And now, in one sentence, she had claimed it like it was nothing more than a rental hall she'd reserved for her own show. I turned to my son, searching his face for a flicker of loyalty, a spark of the boy who once ran through these halls with scraped knees and wild hair, who used to hug me tight and whisper, "Don't worry, Mom, I'll take care of you when I'm big." That boy was gone. In his place sat a man who couldn't even look me in the eye. His silence was worse than any insult, because silence meant agreement. Silence meant he'd rather disappoint me than disturb her. It's a peculiar kind of betrayal when your own child decides you're expendable. As she spoke about her family, 25 people, loud uncles, picky cousins, everyone gathering here like they own the walls, I looked around my dining room. My eyes caught on the chandelier Harold, and I had saved up for years to buy. On the oak table we polished every Thanksgiving. On the framed photos of birthdays and graduations that lined the shelves. This house was my sanctuary, the place where Harold and I poured our love, sweat, and years. And yet, in her words, it became nothing more than a convenient backdrop for her ambitions. A stage for her performance of being the perfect hostess, only she wouldn't do the work. I was the prop, the servant behind the curtain. She didn't say it outright, but every little phrase carried poison. My whole family, as though my family, the one I carried, raised, and sacrificed for, no longer counted. Celebrate here, not your house, not our house. Just here, like I was invisible. You'll handle the cooking, right? Not a question, not even a doubt. Just an order dressed up in casual tones. Each word chipped away at me until I wasn't a host or a grandmother anymore. I was stuff. The unpaid maid in an apron no one bothered to thank. Beneath the table, Harold's hand found mine. His fingers were warm, steady, the same hands that had held me through childbirth, through funerals, through sleepless nights. He didn't speak, he never did when tempers could spark, but the pressure of his hand said everything. You are not wrong. You are not alone. That silent solidarity kept me from breaking. But the hurt still burned. As she rambled on about her relatives' food preferences, no peanuts, no dairy, Aunt Marie likes only organic turkey, I thought about the decades behind me. I had given everything to this family. I cooked every holiday meal, even when my back ached. I sewed costumes for school plays, stayed up past midnight to finish them, then applauded from the back row without anyone noticing the dark circles under my eyes. I babysat grandchildren whenever they needed, no matter how tired I was. I kept quiet when my knees screamed, when my doctor said I should rest. Because that's what mothers do, right? We sacrifice. But sacrifice becomes invisible after a while. People stop seeing it as love. They start seeing it as duty. And sitting there at my own table, I realized I had become nothing more than their safety net, expected, assumed, forgotten. When I finally whispered, "That's a lot of people," my son chuckled lightly and said, "It'll be fine, Mom. You've always handled it before." Those words stung deeper than I can describe. You've always handled it. Yes, I had. But not because I had to. Not because I was a machine. I did it out of love. Out of joy. And now it was no longer love, it was expectation, obligation, entitlement. He didn't even notice how tired I was. He didn't see the way my hands trembled after hours of kneading dough. He didn't hear the quiet groans when I bent to scrub the floors. To him, I was just background music, always there, always steady, never needing rest. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam my fist on the table. I didn't cry. I just sat there, breathing slowly, staring at the Christmas wreath I had hung on the door myself, the one with tiny red ribbons Harold had helped me tie. And I made a decision. I would not spend another holiday breaking my back while being treated like an afterthought. If they saw me only as a maid, then they could learn what life was like without me. I looked up, forcing a smile so calm it startled even me. "Wonderful," I said, my tone light, almost cheerful. "Then I'll go on vacation. You can cook and clean yourselves." "I'm not the maid." The room froze. Her face paled, like I had slapped her without lifting a hand. My son blinked, confused, his mouth opening and closing as if words had abandoned him. And Harold? He squeezed my hand harder, his eyes shining with quiet pride. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Even as I sat there, spine straight, voice steady, the bitterness lingered. Every second of silence after my words was filled with memories of giving, of serving, of waiting for recognition that never came. I thought of the time I stayed up all night sewing a dress for her because the store had closed early, and she wore it without once saying thank you. I thought of the countless afternoons I spent rocking her children to sleep so she could rest, while she later criticized the way I folded laundry. I thought of birthdays where I baked cakes, decorated rooms, bought gifts, and yet my presence was treated like an accessory, optional, replaceable. Resentment is heavy. It doesn't explode. It lingers like smoke in your lungs, making it hard to breathe. That night, after the dishes were cleared and the house grew quiet, I sat in the living room with Harold. The lights from the Christmas tree blinked softly, casting gentle glows across the walls. "I never thought it would come to this," I whispered. Harold nodded. "But you're right," he said. "You're not their servant." And in that moment, something inside me closed. A door I had kept open for far too long. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would never again let myself be used in my own home. I didn't cry that night. I sat in the quiet living room, the Christmas tree lights blinking softly, and let silence wrap around me. But inside, it was not silence at all. Inside, there was a storm. I had thought the sting of my daughter-in-law's words would fade once the evening ended, but they didn't. They echoed in my head over and over. The way she said my whole family, like mine, no longer mattered. The way she assumed I would serve, like it was my duty. And worst of all, the way my son nodded in agreement, like he had forgotten every single thing I had done for him. That was the wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. I remember when Harold and I first bought this house. It was nothing fancy back then, just a plain two-story with creaky floors and a yard that needed love. We dreamed of filling it with warmth, laughter, and family. And for a long time, we did. At Christmas, we would drag in a tree that was always a little too big for the living room. Harold would wrestle it into the stand while I strung the lights, and the children would run around, hanging ornaments in clumps at the bottom because they couldn't reach higher. Those were the years when my son's smile lit up the whole room. He would hug me after we finished decorating and say, "Thanks, Mom. This is the best Christmas ever." That little boy's voice still lives in my memory, and sometimes it feels more real than the man who sat across from me at dinner tonight. Back then, the holidays meant more than a decorated tree. They meant work, days and nights of it. I roasted turkeys until my back ached. I rolled pie crusts until my hands were raw. I cleaned every corner of this house so that when family walked in, it would shine. But I never minded, because I believed that effort was love. I believed that every pie, every ribbon, every dish scrubbed clean was proof of how much I cared. Now I look back and realize how invisible that work became. Nobody remembered who baked the pie. Nobody noticed who cleaned the dishes. They just expected it, year after year. And tonight, when my daughter-in-law made her announcement, I finally understood. All those years of effort had turned me, in their eyes, into a permanent worker rather than a mother. It wasn't just tonight's demand that hurt me. It was the years of little things that build up, like drops of water slowly wearing down stone. I remember the first Christmas after my son got married. I had set the table with our family china, the same set Harold's parents gave us as a wedding gift. My daughter-in-law walked in, glanced at it, and said, "Oh, this looks old-fashioned. Next year, maybe we'll bring our own set." I laughed it off at the time, but I felt a sting. That china carried memories of every meal we had shared, every holiday Harold and I had hosted with pride. To her, it was just outdated. Another year, I baked 3 different pies, apple, pumpkin, and pecan, because I knew everyone had their favorite. When I set them on the table, she whispered to my son, thinking I couldn't hear, "She always makes too much food. It's wasteful." It wasn't wasteful. It was tradition. It was love. But she couldn't see that. The hardest part has been watching my son change. When he was younger, he would defend me in small ways. If someone criticized my cooking, he'd laugh and say, "That's the best part, Mom's cooking." If I felt tired, he'd tell me to sit down while he carried plates. But after he married her, that started to fade. Slowly, almost invisibly at first, he shifted toward her side. When she made jokes at my expense, he would smile instead of correcting her. When she dismissed my traditions, he shrugged and went along. I told myself not to be jealous. I told myself it was natural, wives come first, and that's the way of life. But deep down, I felt a coldness growing. And tonight, when he nodded in agreement with her plan, I saw just how far I had fallen in his eyes. I sat there in the quiet after dinner, and I thought about how often I had been the silent support. I was always the one to cook, to clean, to pay attention to every detail so the holidays would be perfect. But who ever noticed? When my daughter-in-law walked into a decorated house, she thought the tree just stood itself up. She thought the table just set itself. She thought the food appeared by magic. She didn't realize, or maybe she didn't care, that behind every sparkling decoration was hours of my work. And my son, who should have known better, acted the same way. He had grown so used to me giving that he didn't even see it anymore. I thought about the Thanksgiving when Harold was sick and I stayed up all night basting the turkey, checking on him, and preparing the meal alone. No one said thank you. They just ate, laughed, and left. I thought about the Easter when I filled baskets for the children, hiding eggs in the yard even though my knees could barely handle the bending. No one noticed how hard it was for me to stand back up. They just smiled at the candy and moved on. I thought about birthdays, graduations, anniversaries, every single one where I was behind the scenes, planning, paying, preparing. And somehow, in all of that, I became invisible. As I sat replaying the evening, I realized something important. Her words tonight were not just a careless request. They were the truth spoken out loud, the truth they had all been living by for years. In her eyes, I was the maid. In my son's eyes, I was dependable background. And in everyone else's eyes, I was just there to make life easier. That realization was painful, but it was also freeing. Because once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. Later that night, Harold sat beside me. He didn't have to ask what I was thinking, he knew. "They don't see what you've done," he said quietly. "But I see it. I've always seen it." Tears filled my eyes, but I held them back. He was the only one who never forgot. Through every holiday, every long night, every sacrifice, he knew what it cost me. And that mattered more than I had realized. For the first time, I allowed myself to admit something I had been avoiding. My family didn't value me the way I had hoped. They valued what I did for them, not who I was. That truth was heavy, but it was also clear. It explained every dismissal, every careless word, every nod of agreement my son gave his wife instead of me. And it left me with one choice. I could keep sacrificing, or I could finally stand up and refuse. The images from the past stayed with me all night. My son as a little boy, handing me flowers from the yard. My daughter-in-law dismissing my china as outdated. The sound of laughter in my house, never once followed by thanks. I realized how deeply I had let myself be taken for granted. And the resentment wasn't just about tonight, it was about decades. Every word she spoke, Every action she took reminded me of a lifetime where my love was mistaken for obligation. And that is what hurt the most. I woke up the next morning with a strange sense of clarity. The night before, I had finally said what I never thought I'd have the courage to say: I'm not the maid. The words were simple, but they changed everything inside me. For years, I had been the silent helper, the one who stayed in the background, the one who carried the weight without complaint. But now, I felt a different strength stirring in me. It wasn't loud, it wasn't angry. It was steady. I knew what I had to do. The following evening, my son and daughter-in-law stopped by again. They wanted to go over plans for Christmas. She brought a notepad full of lists and tasks, as though my home was her catering business. Okay, she began, her voice clipped. We'll need 3 turkeys, 2 hams, and at least a dozen side dishes. I'll take care of decorations if you just focus on the food. Oh, and dessert. Everyone expects pie. Her words cut me again, not because they were harsh, but because they were so casual. She spoke as if my time, my energy, my labor were hers to command. I could feel Harold's eyes on me, steady and supportive. My son shifted uncomfortably, but once again, he didn't speak up. I took a slow breath. That won't be possible, I said. She looked up from her notepad, confused. What do you mean? I won't be cooking or cleaning this year, I said calmly. You'll have to handle it yourselves. The silence that followed was thick enough to touch. Her eyes widened, and my son leaned forward, his face tight. Mom, don't overreact. She's just trying to plan. Overreact. That word pierced me. It wasn't just this moment, it reminded me of so many others. I remembered the time years ago when I had asked for help paying for groceries because we were covering bills for their new house. My son had sighed, patted my shoulder, and said, "Don't overreact, Mom. Things will balance out." But they didn't. I covered the bills quietly while they bought new furniture. Now, decades later, here it was again. My voice, my needs, dismissed as overreaction. The little girl in me, the one who had grown up with parents who brushed off her feelings, stirred painfully. I thought of my father, who once told me, "Stop being dramatic. No one wants to hear it." And suddenly I realized this wasn't just about Christmas. This was about a lifetime of being unheard. I could have yelled. I could have reminded him of every sacrifice I had made, every holiday I had carried alone. But instead, I stayed calm. I chose silence, not because I was weak, but because I wanted my choice to be undeniable. Their reaction, she was the first to speak. "You can't be serious. Do you know how much work this is going to be? We can't do it all ourselves." I folded my hands on the table. "You'll manage." My son's voice rose. "Mom, why are you making this difficult? You've always done it before." I looked at him, and for the first time, I let the weight of all my resentment fill my eyes. "Exactly. I've always done it before. And that's why none of you see me anymore. You only see the work." He didn't respond. Maybe he couldn't. The secret plan, what they didn't know, was that Harold and I had already made other arrangements. While they would be running around trying to figure out how to season a turkey, Harold and I would be halfway across the ocean, starting the holiday we had always dreamed of but never taken Rome at Christmas. We had talked about it for years. He would joke one day, instead of sweating over a hot oven, we'll be sipping espresso by the Colosseum. I would laugh, imagining the bells of old churches ringing through the chilly December air. Now it was no longer a dream. I had booked the tickets quietly weeks earlier after one too many small humiliations piled up in my heart. I didn't know then that I would actually use them, but that night at dinner had sealed it. This year, I would not spend Christmas bending over a stove. I would spend it with Harold, holding his hand as we walked through cobblestone streets. The buildup of resentment, her reaction that night, only confirmed my choice. "Do you know what you're doing to this family?" she snapped. "Everyone's counting on you. If you don't help, this whole thing will fall apart." Her words were meant to guilt me, but they had the opposite effect. They reminded me of every time I had been guilted into silence. When I stayed up late babysitting so they could go out, and she told me, "Well, you're not busy anyway." When I bought extra groceries so they'd have food for the week, and she said, "That's what moms are for." When I paid for repairs on their house after the roof leaked, and my son said, "It's not a big deal. You'll get the money back." But the money never came back. The thanks never came. And my place in the family never rose above servant. That night, as she tried to make me feel guilty, I realized something. She wasn't afraid of the holiday falling apart. She was afraid of losing her stage. Without me, she couldn't shine as the perfect hostess. Harold's voice of truth after they left, Harold sat beside me on the couch. His eyes twinkled with something between pride and sadness. "You did the right thing," he said quietly. I leaned against him, letting the comfort of his arm remind me of my worth. "I don't know if they'll forgive me." "Maybe they don't need to," he replied. "Maybe this isn't about their forgiveness. Maybe it's about you forgiving yourself for letting them treat you this way for so long." His words settled in me like a stone in a river. Strong, unmoving. And I knew he was right. The image of freedom that night, I lay in bed imagining the days to come. Snow falling softly outside our window in Rome. The two of us sipping coffee in a tiny cafe, posting a photo with the caption, "Our Christmas is where we are truly valued and loved." It wasn't about showing off. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about making a statement to myself. I was not trapped in the role they had written for me. A moral choice. The next morning, my son called. His voice was softer, almost pleading. "Mom, can't you just do it one more year? For the kids? For the family?" My heart clenched. I wanted to give in. I wanted to be the mother who saved the day, who made everything easy. But then I remembered all the times I had already given in. All the times I had told myself, just one more year, just one more favor, just one more holiday. And I realized something. Love isn't proven by how much you sacrifice. Sometimes love is proven by saying no. So I said gently, "I'm sorry, but no. This year will be different." He hung up without another word. The silence on the line felt final, but inside me, there was peace. Closing the door as the days passed, I packed my suitcase quietly. I wrapped a scarf Harold had given me years ago, the one he bought when he still tried to surprise me with little gifts. I packed a pair of shoes I had been saving for somewhere special. This was finally that place. On Christmas morning, while my son and his wife scrambled in my kitchen, Harold and I would already be in the air. And for the first time in decades, I would not be exhausted, unappreciated, or invisible. I would be free. When the plane touched down in Rome, I switched my phone off airplane mode. Within seconds, the screen lit up. Missed calls. Dozens of them. Messages stacked one on top of another like bricks, each one more desperate than the last. I didn't open them right away. Instead, I looked out the window at the old city stretching beneath the winter sky. Bells rang faintly in the distance, and Harold smiled at me the way he did when he wanted to say, "You did it. You finally chose yourself." But even as I breathed in the joy of freedom, my phone kept buzzing. The world I had left behind was crumbling without me, and they wanted me back to hold it up. Their panic. The first message I read was from my son. "Mom, the oven isn't working right. How do you usually set the turkey? Please answer." Then another, minutes later. "Everyone's arriving and nothing's ready. Why would you do this?" I scrolled further. My daughter-in-law's words spilled across the screen like sharp knives. "This is your house, and you're embarrassing us. Everyone is asking where you are. Do you realize what you've done? You're ruining Christmas for the whole family." I read them all in silence. Their panic didn't surprise me. What surprised me was how quickly the blame fell on me, even after I had told them I wouldn't be part of their plans. They didn't listen then, and they still weren't listening now. The accusations. By the time Harold and I checked into our small hotel, the accusations had gotten harsher. "You've destroyed the family tradition. You only think about yourself. How could you do this after everything we've done for you?" That last one stopped me cold. After everything we've done for you? I nearly laughed out loud in the quiet of the hotel lobby. What had they done for me? I had raised my son. I had hosted every holiday. I had cooked, cleaned, paid bills when they fell short. I had given my life to this family. And now, because I dared to say no, they twisted it into me being ungrateful. I turned the phone face down on the table. I refused to argue with them. Silence as power. In the past, I would have explained myself. I would have written long replies, trying to make them understand that I was tired, that I needed a break, that my body couldn't keep carrying the weight. But explanations had never mattered before. Whenever I tried, they always brushed it off. "You're overreacting. It's just one more holiday. Don't be so dramatic." So this time I stayed silent. And in that silence, I found strength. Their collapse, it didn't take long for their perfect holiday to unravel. A neighbor later told me that cars lined the street outside our house that night. People came in expecting food, decorations, and a hostess ready to welcome them. Instead, they found chaos. My son sweating in the kitchen, trying to figure out how to carve a half-cooked turkey. My daughter-in-law snapping at children while she struggled to set a table that looked bare compared to the holidays I used to create. Guests whispered. Some even left early. And still, the texts kept coming. "This is all your fault. Why didn't you warn us you were serious? How could you abandon your family like this?" Each message was meant to shame me. Instead, they reminded me why I had left in the first place. The resentment I carried, I won't pretend their words didn't sting. They did. Every line reminded me of years of being taken for granted. I remember the Christmas when my daughter-in-law complained the napkins didn't match the plates, even though I had stayed up ironing them the night before. I remembered the Thanksgiving when my son rolled his eyes because I forgot to put out cranberry sauce, though I had cooked 6 dishes for the table. I remembered birthdays where I stood in the background, cleaning up, while everyone else enjoyed the cake I had baked. Their accusations weren't new. They were echoes of every slight I had endured. And as I read them in a small hotel room thousands of miles away, I realized the truth. They didn't miss me. They missed what I did for them. Harold's steady presence that night, as I sat staring at my phone, Harold placed a cup of espresso in front of me. "Don't let their noise ruin this," he said. I nodded, tears threatening, but not falling. I thought maybe they'd understand. I thought maybe they'd see how much I've carried. "They won't," he said gently. "Not yet. People don't notice the ground they walk on until it shakes beneath them." His words steadied me. For the first time, I realized that my silence wasn't cruelty, it was a lesson. The shift inside me the next morning, we walked through narrow Roman streets. The air smelled of roasted chestnuts. Churches glowed with candles. For the first time in decades, I wasn't rushing to baste a turkey or scrub dishes. My phone buzzed again, but I didn't look at it. Instead, I let the sound fade behind me as Harold and I admired a nativity scene in a small piazza. Children laughed, tourists snapped photos, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years: lightness. That was the twist I hadn't expected. The more they accused me, the freer I felt. Back home, their anger grew. By Christmas afternoon, their messages had shifted. At first, they begged. Then they blamed. Now they raged. "You've embarrassed us in front of everyone. You don't care about family. You've destroyed everything we built." Reading those words, I felt both hurt and strangely vindicated. They were wrong about me, but right about one thing. I had destroyed something. Not the family, but the illusion. The illusion that I would always be there, no matter how they treated me. My silent reply, I didn't write back. Not once. And that silence was louder than any speech I could have given. Instead, I walked with Harold across a bridge that glowed under Christmas lights. Couples strolled hand in hand. Children pointed at the river below. The world felt alive, and for the first time, I was part of it again. I realized then, I had been so busy keeping the family tradition alive that I had let my own life fade away. Closing thoughts that night when we returned to the hotel, I checked my phone one last time. Dozens of missed calls. A flood of angry texts. And then one from my son, just 6 words: "You've ruined everything. Don't come back." I stared at it for a long time. My chest ached, but not from regret. From release. Because I knew the truth, what had been ruined wasn't love. It was dependence. It was years of me being taken for granted. And maybe it needed to be ruined. My own comfort that night, Harold and I sat by the hotel window, watching the city glow. I thought of my family back home, stewing in their resentment, and I thought of myself, thousands of miles away, finally breathing. "I should feel guilty," I said softly. "But you don't," Harold answered. And he was right. I didn't. For the first time in my life, I felt at peace with choosing myself. I never imagined I would spend Christmas thousands of miles from home, walking hand in hand with Harold through the narrow streets of Rome. Yet there we were, bundled in coats, our breath visible in the cold night air, the city glowing with lights strung between centuries-old buildings. The bells of a nearby church rang, and for once, I didn't feel like I had to hurry back to a stove, to an oven timer, to someone else's demands. But even in the beauty of that moment, my phone vibrated endlessly in my purse. They weren't finished with me. The pressure when I finally opened my messages that night, the tone had shifted. The anger had softened into something else, pressure. Mom, you can't ignore us forever. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Don't ruin your relationship with the kids over one holiday. Every word was carefully chosen to twist the knife. They wanted me to believe that my silence was selfish, that my refusal to be used was the same as abandoning my grandchildren. But I knew the truth. I wasn't abandoning anyone. I was simply refusing to carry everyone else on my back anymore. The unexpected voice the next morning, I opened my email and found a message that stopped me cold. It wasn't from my son or daughter-in-law. It was from a woman I barely knew, an old neighbor who had moved years ago. She wrote, "I saw your photos in Rome. I just want you to know you inspire me. I've spent years putting myself last, and watching you finally take a trick for yourself, it made me realize I can do the same. Thank you for reminding me that it's never too late." I read those words over and over. Someone who owed me nothing saw my worth more clearly than my own family. That message healed something deep in me that their cruelty had broken. More manipulation, but back home, they didn't stop. A text from my daughter-in-law. "The kids are asking where you are. Do you really want them to think you don't care?" Another from my son. "We can move past this, but you have to apologize first." Apologize. The word nearly made me laugh out loud in the quiet of our hotel room. After decades of unpaid labor, of standing in the background while they enjoyed every holiday I built with my hands, they thought I should apologize? No, not anymore. Memories of hurt every time I read one of their messages, memories surfaced. I remembered the year I got the flu the day before Christmas. I begged them to host just once. Instead, they brought everyone to my house anyway, and I cooked feverishly with a box of tissues by my side. Not a single "thank you." I remembered my son telling me once, "Don't make such a big deal about it, Mom. It's just dinner," as if dinner didn't take days of planning and hours of exhaustion. I remembered my daughter-in-law taking credit for meals I had cooked, smiling when her friends praised her, while I stood in the kitchen washing pans. Every word in their messages was heavy with those old wounds. I felt resentment rise in me, but this time it didn't crush me, it gave me resolve. Choosing myself Harold, and I spent Christmas morning sipping cappuccinos in a small cafe. I turned my phone face down and let the sunlight through the windows warm my hands. "Do you miss them?" Harold asked softly. I thought about it. I missed the children's laughter, yes. I missed the feeling of a full house, the sound of wrapping paper tearing, the clinking of glasses. But I didn't miss the way I was treated. I didn't miss being invisible. "They don't miss me," I said slowly. "They miss what I did for them." And that's not the same thing. Standing firm when we returned home a week later, the messages hadn't stopped. There were voicemails now too. Please mixed with guilt trips. "You're destroying this family. We can't believe you would do this to us. You need to make this right." But I didn't answer. I walked into my house, into the quiet space that had once been filled with chaos, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years, ownership. This was my home. Not a stage for someone else's holiday performance. Not a free banquet hall. Mine. The visit 2 days after we got back, they showed up. I saw their car pull into the driveway. My heart beat faster, but I didn't open the door. They rang the bell, again and again. I heard my daughter-in-law's voice through the door, sharp and frustrated. "You can't just hide in there forever. You're being childish." Then my son's voice, tired but firm, "Mom, please. Let's talk." I stood there, only a few feet away, but I didn't answer. Not out of anger, but out of self-preservation. Because I knew that if I opened that door, they would twist my words again, make me doubt myself, push me back into the role I had finally escaped. So I stayed silent. And for once, That silence felt like freedom. The turning of the tide later that week, another message came. This time from my oldest granddaughter. "Grandma, I saw the pictures you posted. Rome looked beautiful. I hope one day you'll take me with you. Love you." I cried when I read that, because it reminded me that not everyone in the family saw me as a servant. Some of them still saw me as a person worth loving. It gave me hope that maybe someday my son would see it too. But until then, I had to stand firm. The final choice, as the weeks passed, the pressure slowly lessened. They realized I wouldn't break. I wouldn't explain. I wouldn't apologize. I wouldn't argue. And in that silence, I discovered something powerful. I was free to define myself again. Not as a maid, not as the background worker, but as a wife, a woman, a grandmother who still had a life to live. The last reflection one evening, Harold and I sat by the fire, sipping tea. He looked at me with quiet pride. "You don't look tired anymore," he said. I smiled. He was right. The lines on my face were still there, but they no longer felt carved by resentment. They felt like proof that I had survived. For the first time in decades, I felt like myself again. I don't know what the future holds for my son, for his wife, or for the holidays to come. Maybe they'll change. Maybe they won't. But I know one thing with absolute certainty. I will never again allow myself to be treated like I don't matter. And if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been told you're only valuable for what you can give, let me tell you this, you are more than their servant. You don't have to earn love. You already deserve it. I realized something standing in the streets of Rome. Age is not about weakness. It's about dignity.